Hello, my name is Chris Young, and welcome to the UYC Show. Urban Youth Collaborative is a nonprofit 501c3 based in San Diego. Our mission is to support student-led Christian clubs on school campuses and connect local churches to those clubs. This is a weekly show to tell the story of all God has done through us, to encourage you, the listener, and help explain how this can be done wherever you are. Today, we have a question and answer show with UYC's City Heights Director Brent Hayden and UYC's Coastal Director Ryan Simon. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris.
Good. It's good to have you
coastal.
Here. That's right. So we got, let's see here, maybe 10 questions we're going to plow through. Questions about youth ministry, questions about campus ministry. So let's kick it off. The first question is, how do you react when a student reacts in a hostile manner when you share the gospel with them? Who wants to take this one?
I want to know who asked that question. Where did these come from?
These are from different people that have emailed us,
okay.
Some of our interns.
All right.
So, yeah.
How do you react when a student reacts in a hostile manner? What do you think, Ryan? What do you got?
Well, I think that first you have to deal with the student one-on-one. If you are in the middle of speaking or in the middle of leading the club, that needs to be dealt with after club is over, or maybe in a time where you can get to talk with them individually. Once that happens, though, I find that a lot of times when kids are hostile towards the gospel, and that was a good rhyme, then it really stems from a place of hurt personally and emotionally, and just getting into obviously, you can't have a psychiatric session with them there, and but trying to really feel and find out where those emotions are coming from in the first place.
True. I think it's good. I was thinking it's only happened a couple times that I can think of to me personally, but it's normally because there's other things going on. Like, it's not normally about that. It's about a bad church relationship or families going through something or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, and then every once in a while, you just get the one kid that just tries to be funny. And so you have to kind of feel it out a little bit. Like, is this going to be a funny reaction? Like, is he just trying to work the crowd? Mm-hmm. And so I try to look for common points. I try to Ben Shapiro it. So I look for common points of interest, and then I just try to make it where I can actually try to like swing the conversation. And if something has to go deeper, I try to make it where we can talk about the things that can be public, and like try to take it up. Like, if this is the argument right here, then are you really saying this? And maybe it's even bigger. I'm sure all of us have kind of felt that from time to time. So I try to get everybody kind of on the same page and kind of de-escalates it a little bit. And then hopefully we can follow up afterwards.
That's good. I mean, I would add, it depends on what you mean by hostile, but
yeah, if we're talking guns on campus, that's a whole different thing.
I mean, the Bible tells us that everyone's going to be really hostile, but if we're talking like actually aggressive, there's got to be certain ways that you're ready to deal with whatever may come, because the gospel is, it's hard for people to hear, because we're telling them that they're sinners. They need a savior, and they don't want to hear it. They don't want to be confronted by their sin. So you have to be ready for anyone to be hostile, and hostile in terms of verbally hostile or aggressive. It's a possibility.
Yeah, I think, and just even thinking back, I think probably most of the times this ever happened to me, like in a real life, in a school setting, is normally like when it's a stump the pastor sort of day, and you kind of like let the kids have like the opportunity to ask whatever questions, kind of like the questions we're reading right now.
Yeah.
So they're stumping us, but you ask them to stump the pastor. And so they normally try to ask some of the things that are already going to be controversial. You're already kind of ready for that. Like, I already know when you open up for questions, there's going to be a question about LGBTQ. There's going to be something. So you've got to figure out, where am I going to go with that? How much am I going to go into this? Because if you're just like pushing kids that are going to frustrate them, that's not a healthy debate. It's not a healthy conversation, And so I look for common ground that way, and just say, hey, you know what? Let's, like, if they're coming to me with that specific issue, say, hey, let's broaden it out a little bit. Like, let's just talk about all sexual sin. So that way it's no longer pointing a finger at somebody, but it kind of says everybody in here has got some issue with some sexual sin, whether the Bible says that if you think it, that's the same as doing it. Like, now we all have lust. So let's take it up a notch, not like nail it down more.
Focus on one very specific thing.
And then it kind of takes that hostile person and say, well, no, but I want to know about this. I was like, well, the Bible doesn't just talk only about that. Like there's a lot of sexual sins, and that way they can feel free to take themselves off the hook or see that this is not an attack just to them, but it's actually across the entire board. Like there's far more people in my church, whatever church I might go to, that would be having sexual sin issues that aren't just that, and so if we just look for that, then I think that we run the risk of polarizing or isolating something that's not necessary. So
that's good. Alrighty. Well, next question is, what's a good way to attract more kids to campus ministry? Pizza.
Money.
Oh, money.
Yep. Just like dollar bill, y'all.
Make it rain.
Yeah, we just like make it rain, walking into a campus classroom.
Yep. Contests and bands.
Contests, bands. Yeah,
that's probably a more spiritual, better answer.
A little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is a simple thing to do. I was commenting it today at Hoover High School, like the way Hoover is set up now because of construction. You go through the library, so you get this large swath of the population seeing you. We walked in with 16 pizza boxes, and then you walk right into the quad, which it didn't used to be that way. And so then everybody, like we're actually standing in line while people are in line for cafeteria, and we're trying to cut through the line. And so people just start following us like the Pied Piper. So anyway, I'm not saying do a parade march like Jericho all the way around the school. But if they see you carrying 20 pizza boxes and they ask, and kids always ask, hey, can I get a slice? And I always go, yep, we're in the gym. Yep. See you in 5 minutes. And they're like, anybody can come? Yeah, it's Faith Club. Come on. And he's like, whoa. And so like today we had like 5 or 10 people that actually just followed us into the gym. And so it made us have 100 kids today. But it was a little bit out of control. I didn't have enough pizza.
Probably.
So I'm normally looking for how to have less kids because I want to eat pizza. But
yeah, in high school, I was the pizza and Jesus guy. And I was okay with being the pizza guy as long as I was also the Jesus guy. And that's what kids look for. So yeah.
At Roosevelt, they used to call it Pizza Club. It didn't even call it Jesus Club. Like I didn't even get the Jesus guy. It was like I'd go on campus and I'd walk out of the office and I hear people like all Pizza Club, and kids would just be running. And they had to like create different rules so that kids couldn't run that way. And I had to say, and actually, guys, it's the Jesus Club, but we serve pizza.
That's good.
Yeah.
I would say being relevant too. Don't
spiritual.
I remember a student leader said, oh, I really want to do a study on Revelation. And I'm like, that might be good, but maybe let's try and make it a little bit more broad, something that the students are dealing with on a daily basis, and I would say getting your name out there. If you're just sitting in a bungalow in the corner, you're not going to attract very many people. So just being willing and able to go outside of the classroom to let people know that you're there.
I also asked one school one time if they'd be willing to give up their pizza so that we could get something to give to the whole campus.
Nice.
So I was like, so for 2 weeks, like we're not going to do pizza, but then we're going to buy Otter Pops. We're going to buy 500 Otter Pops.
That's good.
And then instead of club, you're going to come here and meet. We're going to pray, and then we're going to send you out with like Otter Pops to your campus. But then we got in trouble because then we had too much litter all over the campus grounds, and they said the Faith Club can't use Otter Pops. So once again, shot down for the gospel.
Oh man,
and Otter Pops, Louis Blueberry.
That's rough. Alrighty, let's move on to the next one. How do you connect with church partners? And I'll start this one off. I would say, it starts with a sit down, coffee, food, meeting them, and not expecting anything in return. So I would say connecting with church partners, just knowing who's around, knowing the churches that are close to the schools, knowing the certain youth pastors that are there, knowing the lay of the land, learning what's around the different schools is a great way to start. And then once you have that, then going to network meetings, going to knock on the church door and asking who's your youth pastor. Just starting that is a great way to start the connection. I would say with church partners. So what else?
Yeah. I'm finding out their motivations is a big one for sure. Why do they want to get on campus? For some youth pastors, it's because the youth group is small and they want to grow that. And that's awesome. We can get kids from schools to church. And, for some youth pastors, they want to, strengthen their relationships with kids that they already know, and they want to get on campus and they want to hang out with them. For some, it's, just being in the lives of their students, being on campus, being a face in the community, and being able to go to different schools and have their face be known and be, known as the guy who's solid, that shows up everywhere, that, keeps his word and all that kind of stuff. So I would say, to answer the question of how do we connect with church partners, is like Chris said, sitting down with them and hanging out with them with no ulterior motives, but also then finding out their motivations and seeing where you can pour into them with whatever they want to do.
I think sometimes it takes some time too to develop relationships. Like I've asked some churches for a couple of years, and then after a couple of years, they start to see the value. A new youth pastor doesn't always have time to add another 4 or 5 hours to their week that way.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Like we've talked about it before in other podcasts, but I think it's important because I don't know what youth pastors do during the day when all the kids are in school, because most youth pastors I know don't spend 4 or 5 hours every single day preparing, unless they're in school studying themselves, like if they're using it as a both and situation. But so like what better place is there to be than on a school campus, looking at, seeing kids, talking to administrators, like being where kids are, knowing some of the teachers. It's good to hear. It's good to know the teachers that your kids are talking about, because then when I hear kids talk negative of them in youth group, I'm like, that teacher's not such a bad teacher. Like, that's what you say about me when you're not a youth group, right? Because I didn't let you use your phone during class or during the lesson. So I think part of it is just like being faithful in that situation. The hard part, I think, for me is that in my zip code where I've done ministry, I've had so much church turnover for youth pastors. So like, it doesn't matter if I had a great relationship with other youth pastors 3 years later, almost all the youth pastors I was working with 3 years ago are no longer working in the same churches. So that makes it really hard, because then you're almost starting over again. So hopefully I've got a relationship with the church, and hopefully I got a relationship with the school. And then hopefully I can kind of hold the line until somebody else kind of gets trained up. And then I can hopefully just like partner with them for the amount of time that they have it. And then hopefully they go to another place that we have campus ministry somewhere else, and they're working with another UIC, person somewhere else. But
yeah, I think trying to get to their church is a great way to connect with a church partner. Just seeing what they do, how they worship. If it's just once every 6 months, once every quarter, whatever it is, as
checking
long
in
as,
with them,
just
like supporters,
being there and knowing what they do and how they worship. And it makes it so much easier too, when you're inviting a student. You can say, oh yeah, if you don't have any connection with them, you can say, oh, they do church, I don't really know how or where or when or why, but they do it, so go. But if you've been there, you can say, hey, yeah, I was there, and this is what I saw, and this is how they do things, and this is the time they meet. So that's a great way. That's a great way to be an advocate for them too.
I've also asked churches to even bring me like rave flyers, like to advertise.
Yeah.
So sometimes if pastors, like even if they're not on board with UIC and the whole collaborative meeting together for campuses, like ministry stuff, but they can kind of learn like, oh, I can still market for my youth ministry. And then we get time to walk alongside with the youth pastors and say, it's not just only about your church. Like there's other churches that we're partnering with, but we want your event to be known, So if you guys are doing a harvest festival, get it out to where the kids are so that kids can come to your church. And so, I've said this on other podcasts, but I know that All Peoples is good about that. They bring a little flyer, let kids know that here's a place to come on Sundays, and they're able to make it really productive for that relationship. So.
Nice. That's good. I would add to being open with the resources that you have, and sharing it with them. Being very kingdom minded is a great way to connect with the church, and bringing them to the late lunch and helping them with Project 25, that kind of stuff is a great way. So let's see what's next. When faced with a difficult student in a club meeting, how should one react?
This kind of goes back to the first question a little bit. It might not have been about the gospel, but difficult students are difficult students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you have to be willing to let them know that there are rules. The Bible says that God is a God of order. And so I think you have to even be willing to kick them out of club, is a potential thing, depending on what their attitude is like. But that's one way.
And two, I think it depends on the degree of difficulty. You know, are they being difficult so that are they just being, you know, asking a snarky or sarcastic question, or are they, you know, standing up and, you know, distracting the people around
throwing
them?
things?
Yeah, exactly.
Lighting things on fire.
You know, last semester I did a lot of Q&As, and a lot of times the kids would be, you know, very pointed in their questioning, and, you know, I may be mistaken in this, maybe a good idea, maybe not. But, you know, if I was talking about something, I would stop the club and I'd be like, okay, let's talk about that. You know, let's talk about the issue that you're concerned about. Cause I'm sure if you're asking it, a bunch of other kids are thinking about it.
Thinking about
exactly.
It
so, you know, I would really just address that issue then and there, because if I don't, they think I'm trying to squirm out of it, or they think I don't have the answer, or they think the Bible doesn't say, you know, about this topic. You know, it does.
And I try to go with that too. Like if you learn how to work a crowd, like you can either try to ignore it and push forward, which makes you look kind of incompetent, or you just kind of address it and go with it. And so like I'll put it on a list. Like maybe I don't have time to talk about it right then, but I just let them know I'm not afraid to discuss that topic if they're bringing up a topic. If they're just being jerks, then that's a whole nother thing. And I've said a lot of times, hey, you know what? You don't have to be in this club right now. There's nothing forcing you to be here. This is your own free will. So we're going to ask that you be respectful. If you can't be respectful here, then maybe you need to go out to the quad and, you know, whatever, you know, and I'll give them a piece of pizza on the way out. Be like, if you only came for pizza, grab a slice and go, man. Cause we don't need that.
Yep.
You know, last year at San Diego High, not to throw anybody under the bus, but, Jesse and I went there and, we ended up having one less pizza box than we took.
Oh, no.
So we took 14 pizza boxes, and when we served it, there was only 13. So I knew, and Jesse thought that maybe we left one somewhere, maybe we counted wrong, but a group of kids like had taken a whole box and hid it in the back, and the whole time we were talking, they were eating pizza. And so what I did was I didn't say anything right there at that time until I found out about it, and then I made a joke about it, like, and they laughed or whatever. So when I went back and cleaned up, I found the box and pizza crust or whatever. So they're like, oh yeah, we got over on it. So the next week, and they weren't disruptive. They were just stealing pizza. Right. And in the back laughing, like cutting up. So the next week, I'm talking and I was like, all right. So we're going to do pizza this time, but just so we can be clear, if you steal a box of pizza from your friends in this room to be selfish to eat it at Faith Club, like, what are you really here for? And then all the kids were like, ooh, and they're like pointing at the kids. So I didn't even have to ask. They all pointed at them and burned them, and they all put their heads down. And I was like, hey guys, it's all right. That was I've done school ministry a lot. Nobody's ever stolen pizza from me. Congratulations. You guys win. Don't do it again. And they're like, okay, we're sorry, Pastor Brent. You know, so, but I mean, like you could take a bad situation, make it funny, acknowledge it. Like, dude, that's pretty ingenious. You know, and I probably would have wanted to do the same thing. I just was never smart enough to do it. So
yeah, the physics involved in that must have been
right.
impressive.
How do you hide a whole pizza box while you're walking by? Because it's at the front.
Yeah.
And then they had to get it into a table and then distribute it to everybody while I was talking, and I still didn't catch it. And I was like, props to you guys. Like, you know, most of you kids aren't very skilled that way, but that was good.
Yep. Alrighty, here's the next one. What do you do when a campus administrator absolutely doesn't want your ministry on campus? What do you do?
I think it depends on the administrator. If it's
flowers,
yeah,
no, that could be seen as a sexual gift. Like, don't do it. Starbucks, yeah, maybe.
I have a paw analogy. How dare you?
Yeah, you're trying to kill me.
Yeah,
I was just trying to be nice.
But yeah, I mean, there are definitely the students have rights, the clubs have rights, and, you know, the Equal Access Act says that, you know, if one club is entitled to something on campus, then all clubs are entitled to that same thing. And so if clubs are meeting on campus, then every single club has the right to meet as well. And that includes a Christian club. So I would, you know, politely but firmly, and it also helps to have students, you know, on your side as well. If students are the ones campaigning for their rights, campaigning for their club, like at Hoover a couple weeks ago, that really strengthens your case, because not only do you want a club there, but the students that go there are willing to stand up and say, you know, hey, I want this to happen, and this, you know, I know that X, Y, and Z has to happen in order for me to have this club, and I know that I want to go through those steps to be able to have this club.
Huh,
that's good. Why don't you tell us about the charter school out in Point Loma? What's going on there?
Correa?
No, with we got a school out there that has told you no, and so we started the club in the park.
That's right. Yeah. So, last year I was trying to start a club at a certain school, and I went weekly to the front desk and tried to get in touch, emailed the people that I wanted to email. Never really got a response. Maybe got 2 responses in 4 months of emailing them, and the last response was basically no. And I was a little discouraged, and then me and some church partners sat down to see what was our strategy to get on campus, because we really wanted to get on campus. And so this semester we're meeting on the grass inside of a shopping center nearby, and I bring pizza and a blanket, and we bring games and a speaker, and we invite a bunch of students right after school to walk right across the street and onto the grass, and then we have club there. So it's not really an official school club, but we have students that come and listen to the gospel and eat pizza. So I'd say that's a success.
Cool. Yeah. You got to figure out kind of what's going to work on your campus. So, I mean, I think we say all the time, like there's easy ways to do this and there's hard ways. And sometimes playing hardball isn't always the best ball. Just because if you have to get to that point, it's good to know that we're on good grounds and that we're standing on a firm foundation, the Constitution, and we're not doing anything illegal. We're actually following the rules, probably more so than most of the other clubs on campus.
Yeah.
Because we pay attention to this stuff and we try to educate my volunteers. You be better at this than the school administrator. So make sure that you're following all the school guidelines. But every once in a while, you're going to get somebody that's just for some reason misunderstanding about things and trying to figure out how to make something happen. So like at Hoover, that was a pretty good example. And it was just really a misunderstanding, but somebody just thought that we were outside of our purview. So we had to say, no, all of our leaders are vetted. We're following the school rules. We turned in all of our paperwork. We actually asked for all of our volunteers to have their paperwork filled in. Everybody had their TB test. Everybody got their background check. Nice. So we're one of the only groups on campus within a couple of weeks that our entire staff was already cleared and vetted. And so how are they going to we're doing everything they want us to do. It's not their determination to determine content. That's actually illegal. And the kids had to stand up for it. And so, rather than us fighting, going to bat, I told the kids, I said, hey, sugar, not salt. So go in there respectfully and just say, we're wondering how come we've been denied? What can we do to fix it? We've already done this and this and this measure, and the Constitution of the school says this and this and this. So what are we missing? And so they did all that and they were still denied. And then I said, well, if you get denied again, then go ahead and you can give them a copy of the bylaws, our bullet points that we got from Dean Broyles, and just say, here's our constitutional rights. We have the right to assemble, and it's really not your job as a school to determine that. It's actually blocking us from our constitutional right. And as soon as they mentioned that, and as soon as they mentioned the legal part of it or whatever, the school backpedaled and it's oh yeah, sure. Yeah. You guys can start next week, and there was 10 or 15 kids that were asking while we were having those meetings. Yeah. Hey, when's club going to start? So the kids actually were emboldened because their friends wanted to have a club and they didn't want to go to the administration. Nobody wants to have that conversation. I said, but if you want this to happen on your club, I can't fight for it. It's not my job. It's not my school. It's your school. I'm here to help strengthen you and equip you with what you need to actually go to your school. And so with some fear and some trepidation, we prayed, and they're I don't know about this, but then they went after school, scared, trembling, and, looking at their administrators and saying, I think that we're not being allowed to do what we're allowed to do. And as soon as they put that stuff out there, it all happens. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it's nice to know that when it comes to those things that legally we're where we need to be.
Yeah. So to tie those two together, I would say as far as a ministry, being willing to think outside the box and maybe not even work with the campus, being willing to say, hey, if God is leading us, maybe we need to think about meeting after school, right outside of school, or being willing to be there once a month, or being willing to work with the campus so that the name isn't tarnished. And then as far as a student, knowing your rights, that you can meet, you can have a club as long as one club's allowed, all clubs are allowed. And so if you're a student and an administrator doesn't want you there, just knowing your rights and being willing to stand up for them.
Let's follow the rules.
Yeah.
Follow the rules. Of course, just follow the rules to the utmost.
Let's go ahead and look at this one. How does one get better at public speaking of the gospel?
Practice.
Yeah.
Just got to get them up there.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to be there to walk them through it a little bit, because like you've all had somebody start this talk and you're just like, you're trying to make the save. You're like, okay, I need to say this. Okay, they really made it sound like it's works-based salvation. So you just sit back, but you just watch students do it over 2 or 3 years, and you're just like, dude, this kid's like really like growing. Like I even saw a kid today that I was like, I'm going to ask this kid to be an intern next year. Like I already know, like I've watched his journey, and he is just solid. And he went from timid and not wanting to get up front. And today he held it down for 110 kids, like in the stands, brought the gospel salvation, like went long. We almost didn't get pizza because he was preaching. And I was like, dude, go for it, man. He invited everybody to his church, showed them where it was. Like it was really great, but it's hard. Like the first couple of times you're just like, you just want to help him. You're sitting there going, come on, man, you can do it.
Yeah. And I think that really there's two things. Like, one, there's the public speaking aspect of it, and then there's the gospel aspect of it.
Knowing the gospel,
exactly. And, to cover the latter part of that, it's just study. It's just reading your words, staying in there, talking to people who are older than you, wiser than you, and really stoking in the answers and questions that you have. I can't tell you how many times I've called Chris in high school and it was just like, hey, we're talking about this tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to say. Hey, someone asked this question. What do I tell them?
Give me some pointers, some bullet points.
Exactly. And then with the public speaking aspect of it, at first I was only able to speak for maybe like 3 or 4 minutes, and then that was it. I would run out of gas. But just as time went on and as I became more comfortable speaking in front of people, then I was able to speak for longer and longer periods. And so the same thing with student leaders is just, they got to get up there. They got to do it. Nothing's going to make them overcome it other than just doing it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would say step 1 of this is you need to believe it and know it. That's the obvious beginning part, is you have to know the gospel. You have to be able to internalize the gospel before you can public speak the gospel. And I would say practice with even just, one-on-one. That's probably the best way to start, is talking to just one person about the gospel, what it is, what it means. And, not in a rush for time, because in a campus ministry context, you're not going to have a lot of time. So, working on it outside of something with time constraints is a great way to go. And yeah, practice, like you guys said, is great. And being willing to know that you're going to mess up, being willing to know that you're probably not going to say everything that you want to say, and just keep working at it. Just keep going, and always reading scripture is a great way to get better at speaking the gospel.
Now, I always tell my students, you don't have to go there to preach. Just go there to share your story, your life. Like the easiest way is to actually talk about what you believe and what's happened to you. So if they're not comfortable, like, going through some passage of scripture, whatever. So I just always ask them, what's a verse that means something to you? What's your life verse? Like what changed your life in junior high or high school, and get them to start with something that's easy. And then even if I interview them, like one time I interviewed the student, and then once they were just afraid, but then once they started talking, they didn't need me up there anymore. Like they just needed that catalyst a little bit. So having to be confident what they're going to talk about, where they're going to go. And then and then at the end, kind of coming in, just kind of like closing it out a little bit. So that just kind of helped them, and just let them know I sat up there with them. So you're not alone. And they would look at me. Sometimes I'd be like, you're doing great, man. Like, tell them about that story. Oh yeah, that story. And then they would just keep going.
Yep.
So
that's good. All right. This one should be pretty simple. It says, I've been wanting to go to church or youth group, but my parents won't drive me. How can I get to church when I don't have anyone to take me? And I would just say, if this is a student listening, obviously, then look to the UYC staff, the church partner, the campus ally, that would be the admin. Why can't I think? The advisor. Gosh, why couldn't I think of the word? The campus advisor. Go to one of them and ask, where they go to church. Ask if they can give you a ride, and start from there. And if this is not a student asking, then I would say you need to be willing to give those rides, and that's good. I mean, anything you guys want to add to this?
I mean, we're really there. If there's a student, listening, we're there to support your parents. And we're there to make sure that, you guys are being a family unit and following the gospel. And we're not going to tell you to directly disobey your parents. If your parents absolutely 100% aren't going to let you come to church, we're not going to kidnap you from your house and bring you. But
we will, but you will. Your church won't.
I can't speak as far as my church. But yeah, we're gonna do all that we can and all in our power to make sure you're getting to youth group. You're getting to church. You know, we put collectively, I'm sure, millions of miles on our cars driving kids to and from church and to and from youth group. So
yep.
And I'll just say, make sure, like, if there's two things here, either one, parents don't want you to go to church, or parents don't want to drive you to go to church. Like, those are two different things. So if they don't have time or they're just busy, then then let's find somebody to help get you a ride somewhere. If that's not the issue, if the issue is they don't want you to be there, then that's where we have to kind of honor the family and do respectful things to win your family's approval to do so.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you can even say, hey, can I do some chores around the house, and maybe can I earn the ability to go? I know it's a Wednesday night. You don't want me out till, 9 o'clock because I have homework, but do your homework ahead of time. Like, I think there's things that students can do. And then also for leaders, make sure you got consent. That's an important thing. Make sure the family know who you are. And sometimes me getting to know the family, I invite the whole family to come to church, and I'm just like, hey, then they're like, oh wow, there's this like youth pastor guy. And so then I get invited to come over and do things in their home or whatever. And so then you become part of the fabric of the family. So I think that's something that we can do to help kind of bridge that gap so the kids can get there. I don't want to have them not have access.
Yep. And maybe a leader needs to be willing to take church to a student's house even. All right. Last question. Do I have to go to college to be a youth pastor? Who wants to take that first?
Not necessarily, but it's highly recommended. I mean, as far as my circumstances go, I'm currently going to do a community college right now, transferring to a Christian college, and then plan to go on to seminary. And the reason why is just because most of the youth pastor positions that I see for larger churches or for churches that gain a lot of responsibilities on the youth pastors are bachelor's required, master's recommended, and with that obviously means college, but also to have that knowledge, even if 100% of what you learn isn't going to be completely applicable to youth ministry as a whole, I think having that knowledge in the first place is going to catapult you to just another level of being able to speak to kids, being able to share the gospel, being able to know what you're talking about, being able to preach. If you're wanting to be a youth pastor or a pastor, being able to preach in front of, hundreds of people and be able to let the message be, known and heard. So yeah, it's not required, but I would highly recommend it for sure.
And I think it kind of comes down to two different things. When I tell my interns that work here at my church, there's really two ways about going this. Like, your call, you got to be called. If you're going to be in youth ministry, there needs to be a call. And then people are like, well, I'm already called, so why do I have to go to learn that I'm called? Well, there's a difference between being called and qualified. And so there's really two avenues. Like, you either need to gain experience, or you need to gain information, knowledge, and understanding. And those things can go together. They don't always go together, but most people in denominations, especially, if you want to be a part of a pedigreed situation, then you're going to have an opening. You're going to have more churches opportunity if you're going to go somewhere. If you're going off of relationships and experience, that's fine, but just know there's going to be places you can't work. So, for instance, like me growing up in the Southern Baptist church context, by me doing and choosing that, and for my education, it's not choosing other denominations. So I can't be mad at them when I can't get hired because I don't have an MDiv from Westminster. Like, I went to a church that they actually wanted me to re-educate to be able to stay on staff there. And I was like, that's not going to happen. So I've already done my education. Not everybody's not going to like where you got your education. It doesn't matter where you went. Like, there's always going to be somebody that'd be like, oh, that's too liberal. Oh, that's too conservative. Oh, that's too health and wealth. That's too whatever. Not enough. Whatever. So I'm just saying, like, I would know your call. And then if you're called to be a youth pastor, you're going to want to be excellent, right? The Bible says, study to show yourself approved unto God. Yeah. And you can study in your room. That's fine. But one of the advantages of Bible college and even seminary is it's a testing ground for like theological ideas and facts. So when you're reading something, we get this tendency to want to teach people. If you go to a Bible college and you just read something, everybody in the theological department's already had that conversation. So if you're going to talk about pre or post or tribulational, you've already kind of like used your spiritual chops a little bit, and you're used to debate, you're used to dialogue. So if you're just studying in a vacuum, you can like really get self-deceived where the information's good, but you don't know what to do with it. So I would just encourage you as a youth pastor, you want to be sharpened. And so part of that sharpening learning is being around people that can sharpen you. I'm not saying it has to be a college, but if it is, you also need to determine, am I going to an accredited college, or am I going to a theological training college? Because then once again, you're going to like either train yourself into a certain kind of church that you can work at, and then you need to stay in that denominational vein, or you can like kind of broaden it out by having a more universal theological understanding, and then you can like apply that to a lot of different ways. So I think it really kind of depends on what your version of being a youth pastor is.
Yeah.
And are you trying to be a youth pastor for life? Or are you trying to be a youth pastor for a season? Are you trying to move to the pastorate? Because then there might be different classes I would suggest you taking if youth pastor is not going to be exactly what you're going to be called to for life. I believe it's a lifeline calling for me. So I didn't want to focus on those other things. I wanted to focus in youth ministry specifically. And so 25 years later, I'm still doing youth ministry until I get too old to go up the stairs. But
oh man, that's funny.
Not funny, not funny.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to get some towel for my knees. Hold on.
To kind of summarize that in a quick one-word answer, do you need to go to college to be a youth pastor? No, you don't need to go to college to be a youth pastor. But you know, where are you looking at? What is the job you're looking at? Are you looking at just in general? Are you looking at a specific job? You need to know, you know, and that goes with pretty much everything in life, relationships, and, you know, who's asking the question? Are you just asking it generally, or is this a church asking? And, you know, find out what the church is asking, find out what the denomination is asking, and be willing to, you know, follow whatever call God has on your life. You know, I would say personally for me, I've wanted to go to college, but God has led me in other ways, and you know, maybe he will bring me back to college, who knows. But I would just say you don't need to go to college to be a youth pastor. Not to say that college is bad, not to say that college is not a good thing, but you know, there's pros and cons to both. There's pros and cons to going to college. There's pros and cons to just starting right with experience. And so I would say look for the best way to kind of marry the two. You know, try and figure out a way to get your schooling in and to get your experience in.
We didn't talk about this, but also doing it as debt free as possible.
And that's
because if you come out of school with $80,000 debt, you can't afford to work as a part-time youth pastor making $2,000. So I think right now our Christian schools are facing a dilemma that the rest of the nation is following, that we end up having degrees that we have to pay for, and we have to make real money to pay for our college loans. Yeah. So I would just encourage you, whoever you are, to get what you can in an undergraduate level as cheap as possible. Go to Grossmont. I went to Grossmont or community college for 2 years, and then transferred when I had enough money to do so. And then I could like get my theological chops for a couple years. And I didn't just waste all my time, and I got a degree. So that's a good proof that I can get other jobs in other places. So, you know, if I don't just have to stay in the youth ministry world, although I feel that I'm called to do that, but it just kind of helps. So, but I wasn't so much in debt that I couldn't branch out a little bit. So,
yeah, I would say too, as we end this, Ryan, you have anything you want to add before I finish this up?
Yeah, I just want to agree with Brent. You know, I'm going through college right now, and I'm just looking at scholarships and FAFSA and Cal grants and everything that I can. And, you know, the little bit of money that my family's managed to save up for college, I've just been really looking at how can I be able to serve most effectively after I get out of college, because just so many people, like you were saying, have, you know, $20, $30, $40, $100,000 worth of debt, and then they can't effectively work in the ministry because they're so worried about paying off their student loans. And, you know, I just want to be able to have as little of a weight on me as possible after I graduate, so that I can just take those steps out into the kingdom and keep furthering, you know, the ability to grow it.
And you're gonna work into a spot too. Like some people get done with Bible college, and then they want to come get a $50,000 youth pastor job. And it's like there's not very many of those that exist in the nation. I can't speak the nation, but in San Diego, there's probably only a handful of those full-time jobs that I can tell you.
Yep.
And so if you have to make that much money to live, now you're stuck being bivocational and trying to work full-time and trying to like do this and, you know, start a relation. I mean, it's just very difficult.
Yeah.
So I'd make it where your options are more open, and so that way you can keep it that way you can work into a job and be faithful with a little bit, and then maybe the church will bring you on with more. So don't be afraid of the $1,000 a month gigs, because you have to learn how to be a youth pastor. Even if you get your education, you still got to learn how to work with people. So many things that my school taught me that I had no idea about, because when I came to work at a church, I was like, man, there's politics, there's people, there's history, there's families. Like, I wasn't trained to be a family therapist, but so much of my work is actually helping youth work with their families. And you have to be listening. You have to like pay attention to that. So it would have been unhealthy for me to come and just be jumped right in and then get paid this a living salary when I didn't have the ability to be able to manage those things. So I had to work into it. So
So I was just going to add this generally. I think our culture wants people to go to college. Our culture says you finish high school and then you go to college, and that's just not the case for everybody. And so whether you're thinking about being a youth pastor or whatever you're thinking about, just know that college is not a mandatory thing for every single person. And just know, what is God calling you to? Is God calling you to go to college and then, take that and take it somewhere else? Or is God calling you straight to, working?
Or being an intern with UYC.
Exactly.
And then we will teach you a lot of stuff.
Or being an intern.
Amen.
Who knows? Cool. Well, for Brent and Ryan, I'm Chris, and thank you for listening to the UYC Show. For next episode, we will continue our book interview with Nate Landis. Visit our website at uyc.org. That's the letter U for urban, Y for youth, and C for collaborative.org. And please consider making a monthly donation on our secure site so that we can expand the work that God has called us to. If you have any questions, email us at podcast@uyc.org. God bless you and have a great day.